Good morning, lunatics, and welcome to another edition of Morning Java. Morning Java, as always, Alex, brought to you by our good friends at the Get Go Cafe and Market, where they're open and they still have buffalo tenders and ranch.
It's been a while since we've done a Java because it's been a while since I've heard about the Buffalo Tenders.
I blew his mind with that. It caused a short circuit in his psyche just thinking about those delicious tenders. I get
It felt like the before times, Hunter. You
It
remember
did.
the before times?
It did. It felt like old times. And right now in the baseball world, Alex, I understand that Pirates GM Ben Cherington believes that we may be sneaking up on old times, that baseball can make a comeback. He said, paraphrasing, I wake up every morning expecting to play baseball games. It sounds pretty optimistic, but you talked to him today. What kind of vibes are you getting from him? Where do you think his head's at right now?
I mean, that was the first question I asked him. We had a conference call with him Tuesday afternoon. And I said, Ben, we just talked to Derek Shelton, and he said about how you guys are preparing for a bunch of different situations, which they have to. I mean, there's one where they're going to play in Pittsburgh, another one where they're going to play in Arizona, another one where they're going to play in Bradenton and all over Florida. It is crazy. It's like, out of all those scenarios that you're talking about, are there any where there's no baseball in 2020? He's like, no, we're being optimistic. We're going to have baseball in 2020. I wake up every morning thinking that there's going to be baseball every day. It was a really, I'll admit, that was one of those it's on a tee, knock it out of the park. But it was a very convincing answer. He truly believes we're going to have baseball right now. And considering everything we've heard, over the last couple weeks about how it's Arizona or bust, or, there might be a season, but it's going to be only in empty stadiums, and it's going to be, crazy divisions. It's like, are we going to play the game or not? It's like, yeah, we are.
At this point, yeah, I'm sure you're feeling. I know how much of a baseball head you are, a baseball junkie you are. So I can imagine that any form that gets these dudes out on the diamond and playing some baseball is going to be satisfactory for you. My whole thing is this. Whenever you look at it right now, Alex, which way are you leaning? How long do you feel like this season's going to be? Because baseball, for me, is such a unique sport in the length of the season. A, obviously, 162-game season is kind of crazy. But B, that length of season is almost necessary to separate the contenders from the pretenders. We've seen so many times the Pirates just at the All-Star break, they look like they're ready. They're there. They're right in the thick of the division, maybe on the wild card berth, whatever. But then over the course of a season, I feel like the true team kind of shines. So if we're looking at a super shortened season, is that going to always be an asterisk in that one in the record books? Are teams going to kind of view that team as, you didn't really win it? You know what I mean?
Now you're setting me up here for, one right on the tee for me, because Rob Manfred doesn't like to put asterisks next to World Series titles. But don't. No.
Was that the sound the trash can made?
Hey. This is a quality Java. No, there's not going to be an asterisk. I feel like the shortest they could really make this season would be about 100 games. Because not only, I know I brought up the Pirate angle a couple times, and you brought it up here too, and it's a good point. All-Star break the last couple years, or somewhere between the All-Star break to the trade deadline, since 2016, those 4 years, the Pirates were right in the thick of things, where they either had a potential playoff spot or they were like 2 games out of one, like a legit contender up to that point. But the other aspect was the Washington Nationals were dead and buried for about the first third of the season last year. They probably would not have made the playoffs in a 100-game season. They needed that full 162. And they were the best team in baseball whenever all things were said and done. So that was something Jameson Town talked about a bit whenever that pact was ratified between the players union and the owners, about how they wanted to make sure that there was a long enough season that, the best teams would make the playoffs. Major League Baseball has talked about maybe expanding the playoffs this year just to make sure maybe you would have a team like last year's Pirates, which probably aren't, playoff worthy, but you would also probably bring in that Washington Nationals team into that equation if you go to 7 teams, which feels a little diluted, but it's time we stop thinking about what the season's going to look like until we're told what the season's going to look like, because it's a fool's errand right now.
Right. At this point, you can just keep branching off and take every path. I think we can both agree on this, though. We're ready to just be at PNC Park, perched up in that press box and watching some baseball. How good is that going to feel?
That's gonna feel so good. That's all I want right now.
after you get your buffalo tenders and ranch.
There we go.
All right, Alex. So another element of this whole baseball season, this baseball madness, is the draft and how they're going to handle the draft. And of course, the NFL draft just went off really without a hitch, man. I was there with Dale and Carter and DK kind of covering all 3 days of that event, and I could not believe how smoothly things ran. You know, if you weren't aware that we were in the middle of this pandemic and things were different, I don't think I really would have noticed anything was different. I thought the graphics team was on point. I thought all the production, all the anchors did a phenomenal job. It was just super smooth. And then just off air, you were telling me something interesting. So I'll just let you fill in here that baseball is maybe looking to mimic their success, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be a major league draft this year. We don't know if it's going to be 5 rounds, if it's going to be 10 rounds. There's definitely going to be a draft. It's going to be July. It might be virtual too. They might be taking a page out of the NFL's playbook. And Ben Cherington talked about this a bit, about how, Pirates might be interested in, contacting the Steelers. Like, hey, how did that go? And obviously just an observer whenever it comes to NFL stuff like this, but it seemed like it really did go without a hitch. I mean, there was no real communication like, oh my goodness, they missed the draft pick time. There's whatever, ESPN got all their sob stories for all the draft picks in there. I mean, it went pretty well. And, if that's what it takes for Major League Baseball, I mean, maybe that'll make it more of an event, especially if there is no season still in mid-July, even though that'd be kind of pushing it.
Yeah,
I get a season in.
I think the ratings reflected too on the NFL draft that people were definitely thirsty for that, and they were just drinking it all in. The ratings were ridiculous. Everybody was watching it. So on that front, I could see MLB maybe benefiting from this because the MLB draft is not like the NFL. No draft is like the NFL draft in terms of just being an event that people will sit down and watch and plan around and invite people to the house before this year. Obviously, you're not inviting people to your house this year, but on that front, I think the MLB draft could potentially benefit from this. I don't know. Do you agree with it? Do you think that the shakeup could be good for the draft and maybe getting some new eyes on that?
I mean, anything that happens baseball wise will be good for growing baseball in this terrible, horrible season where this virus hit at the absolute worst possible time for them, right before the season got going. Baseball's a weird draft though, because, in the NFL draft, someone like Carter could write this magnificent piece breaking down, potential draft picks and, late round steals. That really doesn't happen for baseball because a lot of late round steals are either high school kids that are just going to go to college anyway, and you just draft them and you throw them a check that has a couple zeros and be like, nah, just give up on it, come with us. or their fodder, their people that it's like, okay, maybe he was hurt. It's a weird scenario. A lot of the people who are going to be drafted are high schoolers that nobody knows about. And everyone knew, if you were a casual observer of college not even a casual observer of college football, you knew the first couple of people off the board there. You knew Tua, you knew Burrow. Baseball doesn't really have that. And it also has that problem that it's going to be a couple of years for these players to make an impact in the major leagues. So no, baseball's draft will never be as big as like the NFL's or even the NBA's, which I think is probably the second biggest out of the 4 sports in terms of pageantry and, why you should actually watch this. But yeah, it could potentially help grow the game.
Yeah, and I think any little bit would help. And this season's going to benefit when it does start, regardless of the format, regardless of exactly how it all shakes out. I think it's going to see a spike in viewership too, just for people who are like us, like we were just saying in the last segment. Just thank goodness baseball's back. I mean, in a weird way, it may benefit in that regard to expose some new eyes. Because I'll be honest, last season covering the Pirates for the first time, that was my first time really watching every game of a baseball season and really following along super closely. And there is something about baseball that just the more you watch it, the more it snowballs, the more you kind of start to fall in love with it and understand the old historic take me out to the ball game feel. It has a feel and a tone about it, unlike other games, unlike other sports that I've covered or been around. So I think the more people that you can expose to that and get them to maybe feel that, you could be creating some lifelong fans. All right, Alex, let's wrap it up with this, man. It seems like every Pirate season involves simulations in some form. I think last season it was the 10,000 simulations. the quote from
10,000.
yeah that obviously now infamous. Is it fair to call that quote infamous? Either way, there are some sims. Even though baseball is not being played right now, there are some fine outlets doing simulations of what would be happening right now. How are the Pirates doing in this virtual world?
Well, I'm about 9,998 subs short over what happened last year. No, but fine in one and not so hot in the other. It's literally, I think, about what anyone would the optimistic take on the Pirates, which, they played some tough games. They hung around there. A couple people are hitting. The pitching's looking a lot better. And yeah, they're kind of in the mix of things. A couple games out versus, no, this is one of the worst teams of baseball. Who cares?
Sure. And
It's all right. I think the real Pirates would have, somewhere right in between there. Whenever you work with a sample size of two, I mean, you're going to get stuff like that. I don't know. It was fun. It was something that I keep seeing about simulated seasons. It's like, you know what? No, we're at the 1 month mark. I'm actually going to look at a couple of these good ones, see what happens.
Sure. And something I thought was interesting in both of them was I think from reading your article that's up on the site, I think they both had Josh Bell kind of hitting well, or at least leading the team in batting, as you would expect in power.
Yeah.
And then Chris Archer pitching well in each of the simulations as well, which is something that you've noted repeatedly throughout the offseason, that he was starting to come around and can kind of make these tweaks and adjustments. Whenever you talk about pitchers specifically, this is something I've been thinking about a lot during this coronavirus shutdown. When you have a pitcher like Archer who is maybe retooling a bit or maybe tweaking some things a bit and finding himself a bit, is this layoff going to benefit pitchers like that can just continue to refine and hone with this time off? Because normally he'd be in the thick of regular season right now. If he hadn't figured it out, he'd be allowing home runs right now, not throwing in his backyard, figuring it out. You know what I mean? So is this going to benefit pitchers who maybe needed a little extra time?
I'm not sure about Archer specifically. There are some pitchers who I do think, I wrote about a couple. I think Nick Birdie is someone who, is coming off so many major arm injuries that an abbreviated season could probably do him good, even though maybe the abbreviated angle kind of gets taken away if you're going to play double headers all the time. You're going to play 100 games in a 90-day span, however it ends up going through. But a shorter season would definitely happen. But him, James Marvel, people who are working on new mechanics, I think that's really it can't hurt, I guess, is the main thing. I mean, it would definitely be better to do it in camp whenever you have your coaches right there. You can get immediate feedback rather than, take a video, send it to someone and wait a little bit to get a response back. And maybe I just wasted an entire day of workout. There are a bunch of challenges like that. Baseball's a weird animal because you can technically do a lot of workouts. Like, you can still swing, drill a ball into a net off a tee. You can still throw in a park, but I mean, it's different than like hockey in that regard, where, how many people in hockey actually have their own private rink that they could skate around in. Yeah, it's different. But I think it does create more challenges because I think baseball, just because of the length of the season, I think it lends itself most to instruction. That good instruction could go that extra mile. Whenever you take that away, maybe you can devolve a little bit as a pitcher. But as for Chris Archer specifically, since he did very well in both of the simulations, and he was someone who, like you said, had figured something out last year. He figured out that, two-seamer just doesn't work. I'm going to do me. And you know what? He pitched a lot better whenever he just started doing it. So, yeah, I think the shutdown specifically for Archer, maybe it could help a little. But I think there are going to be other pitchers who it could help a lot more.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting across sports. I've been super just intrigued by the conditioning angle of everything, of every sport, because these are times where guys would be getting professional one-on-one instruction. And for sure, many of them still have the resources to get their workout plans, to have the equipment at their house that they need. But you think about college athletes, I've talked to a lot of Pitt players who don't have weight rooms at their house. These are just college kids that go back and live with their family. So they're lucky if they have a court at their house to work with. So it's very interesting times. I think for the Pirates specifically, you'll see it because, like you've said, baseball is a different animal. A longer season, people don't think of baseball as a physically demanding sport necessarily when you compare it to basketball or football or hockey. But the length of the season and the back-to-back games, and you hit on the most crucial element to me, is if you start adding in multiple double headers and really just start stacking games, you're definitely going to see these guys' bodies wearing down faster, and you're going to see who handled this time off better, I think, which teams had the best plan. So that's a whole nother layer to this wacky season. That just makes it that much more fun. But, I mean, right now, I'm just ready to see them back out there, man. Let's get some baseball,
Yeah.
people.